Hello, everybody. It's 5 o'clock, and if you are just joining us, my name is Allison Arisso. I'm with OutTeach, and welcome to our outdoor learning webinar series. I am here to make sure this webinar runs smoothly today. This is the second in a series of 4 webinars created by outdoor and garden-based education experts Big Green, OutTeach, Green Schoolyards America, EcoRise, and Farm Fresh Foodprints. This particular webinar is focused on teaching and learning outdoors and is hosted by OutTeach. A few housekeeping items before we begin. While we're getting started, please use the chat to introduce yourself so we can see where you're joining us from, and so we can learn a little bit about your role in your school and your district. Everyone in the presentation, other than the panelists, will be muted for the entire presentation. So as we go, if you have questions, please type them into the Q&A section at the top of your screen, not the chat. The chat can get very crowded. And we want to make sure that we answer everyone's questions. In the chat, you'll also see resources provided by other attendees as well as our panelists. So feel free to keep an eye on those. I'll collect all of the questions within the Q&A and pose them to our panelists towards the end. If we don't have time for your question, I'll also be creating a Q&A section on our website. This webinar is being recorded, and I'll be posting that recording on our websites once we're done, and we'll drop those links into the chat towards the end. And that's it. I think we have enough folks in the lobby and we can get started. Jeanne, take it away.
Thanks so much, Allison, and welcome everyone. I want to thank you for joining us today. Also, I don't know that if you can see me yet. I don't know if the video switched. There we go. So I'm Jeanne McCarty, and I'm the CEO here at OutTeach. And OutTeach is a national organization that is built to inspire and prepare today's elementary students to become the next generation of fearless innovators. We are designed by teachers for teachers, and we support teachers in a number of ways, from personalized coaching to professional learning communities that we host, and other supports like open education resources available to all to enhance any curricula that you have. We also build and enhance outdoor spaces that transform the outdoors into active learning labs. Through collaborative partnerships with schools and districts and others across the country, together we're just creating a world where every student can step into the wonder of science, inspiring new ideas and pursuits to solve what we see are the many challenges that we will face in years to come. So today, we're so excited to be joined by some amazing educational experts and practitioners from across the country. All of them are using the outdoors to improve educational outcomes for students. And we all know that when students are more engaged in their learning and when they're directing their own learning, that they're much more likely to succeed. Let me share a little bit about what's to come, and then we'll kick off our panel. So first, we'll discuss the national movement. As everyone here, I'm sure, is aware that during the pandemic, schools across the US and really around the world started to explore the potential of learning outdoors, expanding upon what was an already existing national movement, but it gained so much momentum. And to speak to that point, we're honored to welcome Shital Shah from the Office of the Secretary of Education here in the United States. She's a director of strategic partnerships there, and she'll share why the Department of Education is prioritizing and supporting outdoor learning. Then we're going to hear some examples of how outdoor learning expands students' horizons well beyond what's possible indoors. So every student can experience that kind of learning that broadens their opportunities in the short term and in the long term. So on that front, Grace Manubay is here from DC's Office of the State Superintendent of Education, and she'll share how and why DC's education agency has invested in outdoor learning spaces as well as professional learning for teachers across the city here in the District of Columbia. And then after that, we'll hear more about how outdoor learning sparks inspiration for students. So at OutTeach, we believe that every teacher can be that teacher, that one that children remember throughout the course of their lives if they have the right supports and the right tools. So we're lucky to have three of those teachers here with us today. So first is Katie West, and she's joining from Portland, Maine. She's going to show us how she uses outdoor learning to spark inspiration for all students across all subjects and in some of the most fierce weather conditions possible. So then two of my team members, Teena Hine and Dr. Jarri Goodman, will share what it is about learning outdoors that makes it so much more effective in teaching math and teaching literacy, and then especially teaching science and STEM. Then to close us out, we'll see how a school district in Georgia integrates outdoor learning and early STEM and science instruction to change what's possible for students. Science has a long track record of transforming the impossible into reality, but it does take a generation of dreamers, thinkers, and doers to make good on that promise. So we're hearing from a number of people. I hope you heard about Katie West and some of our teachers that are joining us. But the final person that is closing out our webinar is Janetta Greenwood, and she's going to talk about how her district in Clayton County, Georgia, she's the K-12 science coordinator there, but how her district has prioritized both science and outdoor learning to create the next generation of thinkers, doers, and dreamers. So I'm excited about these speakers. It's a really great group that we have. So I'd like to get started. And to kick us off, please welcome Shital Shah, the Director of Strategic Partnerships at the Office of the U.S. Secretary of Education.
Thank you so much, Jeanne. I am super excited to be here and joining you all, and for what is a super exciting conversation, and I wish I could stay on for the entirety of it. But just to sort of quickly share, the Department of Ed is excited to join this webinar series organized by you all and others that are represented on this webinar, along with all of the educators in schools and community-based organizations. So excited to have you all here to learn and share about the importance of outdoor learning and share sort of your expertise on how you're helping to get your students learning more outdoors and being engaged. Over the past 2 years, we all know and have felt deeply how schools and communities have struggled under these extraordinary circumstances. During that time, governmental agencies, nonprofit organizations have initiated policies and funding to support innovative ideas to help schools, teachers, and students overcome these challenges. One silver lining of the pandemic is that it has increased an interest in outdoor learning. Initially, schools were extremely interested in health and safety benefits, but more and more are now discovering that beyond teaching outdoors, when teachers really use the outdoors to enhance their instruction, outdoor spaces have the power to accelerate learning for students from all backgrounds. ED, the Department of Education, sorry for using the acronym, really wants state education agencies to support outdoor learning initiatives and encourages the use of the American Rescue Plan funding, or ESSER funds, to support this outdoor learning in our schools. These funds are designed to address the loss of learning instructional time through increased engagement. What could be more engaging than an active outdoor learning space? I'm so excited that you've joined us to learn more about how this outdoor learning environment can be a vital educational tool for students of all background. And, you know, to be completely candid, also help support their mental health needs as well, as we're hearing more and more parents and educators and communities are extremely concerned and searching for ways to really enhance the support inside and out of school. So it's also, in addition to that, a really great way to get more science into the elementary school day. With so many STEM careers out there, we need to get all students excited about real world science early on, and outdoor learning makes that possible without taking time away from literacy and math. Outdoor learning is possible at all grade levels in both public and private schools, in urban, rural, suburban locations, and moving outdoors is feasible in all climates across the US. Although I don't know that I'd want to be outdoors too long in below 0 degree weather, but I would be up for it. Thank you all again, and thank you, Jeanne, for inviting us, and also for taking the first step to accelerating learning for your students outdoors. From the Department of Education to teachers and districts across the country, everyone on this call is ready to support you as you work to accelerate outdoor learning. Thank you so much for joining us, and back to you, Jeanne.
Thank you so much, Shital. And it's just great for us to hear the Department of Education's commitment to outdoor learning. So we really appreciate your time and we value your being here. So now we are turning to our next speaker, who is Grace Manubay, the Environmental Literacy Coordinator of DC's Office of the State Superintendent of Education. As education leaders are looking for ways to expand students' horizons, Grace is going to share how and why her agency has invested both in designing outdoor learning spaces and professional development for teachers at the same time, so teachers can step outside the classroom and into an outdoor lab. Welcome, Grace. We look forward to hearing from you.
Thanks so much, Jeanne. Good evening, everyone. My name is Grace Manubay, and I'm the Environmental Literacy Coordinator at the DC Office of the State Superintendent of Education, or OSSE, which serves as the state education agency for the District of Columbia. In the district, we have 240 school buildings. DC Public Schools is the traditional local education agency, or LEA, that operates over 125 of those buildings. We also have 66 charter LEAs, which operate the remainder. DC is very similar to a local control state. Each local education agency is autonomous. So as you may know, ESSER funds go largely to the LEAs directly. OSSE will administer that funding on behalf of the federal government, and we publish guidance on how LEAs can allocate the money. In keeping with guidance for safe schools from the American Academy of Pediatrics and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, one of the early reopening strategies for students in all age groups included utilizing outdoor spaces whenever possible. With increased air circulation outside, outdoor learning spaces had the potential to support concerns addressing space limitations due to physical distancing, as well as mitigating the spread of the virus by decreasing the likelihood that respiratory droplets would be spread between individuals. When OSSE released a funding strategy guide for ESSER 3 American Rescue Plan funds, outdoor learning equipment, supplies, and landscaping were potentially eligible under the category of facility and outdoor space upgrades and modifications. It's important to note that LEAs are the decision makers on how to spend these ESSER funds. One LEA in DC gave each school in its district a set amount of funding for outdoor learning supplies and equipment, and each school completed a procurement order form to get those items, such as whiteboards, picnic benches, lap desks, and canopies. OSSE administered a facilities reopening grant for charter LEAs, and some schools used those funds to purchase similar items. Each LEA decided how to spend its funds at the end of the day. DC is an urban area, and it can be challenging to find natural areas near school campuses, but this project has helped schools view their school grounds with new eyes, looking for opportunities to have students learn outdoors. You may be also aware that state education agencies like OSSE have a state reserve of ESSER funds, which are used also to support recovery. With ESSER 2 funding, OSSE was able to contract with a vendor to provide outdoor learning technical assistance. The project included site-based assessments and guidance for up to 80 schools and a professional development series. The vendor has been able to provide consultation and design support to provide outdoor space ideas tailored to the specific needs of the school. Moving forward from recovery to restoration, OSSE intends to use some of its state reserves to support schools by effectively using existing and newly established outdoor learning spaces for instruction and social development beyond COVID restrictions. Research has shown that spending time outdoors provides numerous benefits to students, such as increased social and emotional health, increased academic achievement, and improved physical and mental health. We are looking forward to providing opportunities for schools and teachers to learn how to make outdoor spaces, how to make outdoor learning a launch point to delve into environmental literacy and green school initiatives. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Grace. And I'll wait for it to switch back. It's wonderful to hear you speak. And I have to say, just as a parent with a child in DC schools, it's one of the reasons I'm so thankful to be there because of the work that you do at OSSE and many others. So we've heard that outdoor learning is both a national and state level priority, but teachers have been under so much stress these days. So I'd love to hear now from some teachers about why outdoor learning is such an important tool for them and how they use the outdoors to meet their own goals for students. We're excited to welcome teacher Katie West from Portland, Maine, to share her thoughts on this. She has been a teacher for more than 20 years, straight through the pandemic, and is now the outdoor experiential learning coordinator for Portland Public Schools. And she does amazing work all seasons of the year. So straight from the front lines of instruction, I'd love to welcome Katie West.
Thank you. I'm so delighted to be here and with all of these panelists that are helping to continue to extend this important work. I'm the Outdoor and Experiential Learning Coordinator for the Portland Public School District in Maine, serving 6,700 students in 17 school buildings, speaking more than 60 languages with 50% on free and reduced meal plans. I have been, as Jeanne said, teaching for over 20 years in various settings, from wilderness expeditions to field experience and years in private and public classrooms. And for me, the through line has always been, how do we bring this type of learning to students of all backgrounds in all settings, and by weaving it into the curriculum. The next slide. At the beginning of the 2020 school year, Portland Public Schools made a bold move and created 156 outdoor classrooms using the first round of ESSER funding for outdoor learning tents, snow pants, blankets, and outdoor learning kits. When I heard the district was encouraging us to teach outside, I really wondered if it would be possible to teach outside all year round, even in the cold weather, in an urban, public, diverse, multilingual school in the Northeast. With support from my school administrator, I shared that this was my intention with students, parents, and teachers. And not only did they welcome it, they loved it and loved it more as the year grew on. And in a year when so many students were feeling isolation and separation, we were creating a community together outside. And I know many people had this experience. And in fact, when the students of one of our middle schools were polled last year about continuing outdoor learning this year, 95% of middle schoolers said yes. And this photo here to me shows the joy that students and those of us who teach outside regularly know about how incredible the content connections that students make are and how numerous the SEL benefits are. And honestly, those who are not always leaders in the classroom often show up as real leaders when you're in the outdoors. And since there's so many great resources for tips and tricks on how to manage classes outside, I thought I would introduce the next level of what we were doing in Portland by integrating environmental literacy practices into our curriculum, as they can really help serve as core routines for learning and teaching outside successfully. These practices provide a simple and low barrier way to help students and teachers build a deeper relationship with the outdoors, and are a great way for teachers to gain confidence in being outside for instructional time. I find too that they help to bridge that idea of taking your indoor teaching outside and really learning how to integrate the outdoors into a standards aligned curriculum. They can also be woven into other moments such as morning meeting time or going out or coming back from recess or lunch. And while I'm only going to talk about 3 of them, you can use this list as research to learn more about these important building blocks. One of the regular ways that I start class outside is with a brief observation spot activity. These spots are also called sit spots and are a place that a student visits regularly throughout the seasons of the school year. And if you do these consistently, students grow to love them and they take great ownership in their spot. This is important, especially if a student does not otherwise have a place that is theirs in their life, or if they have been uprooted from a place that they loved. It begins to reconnect them to a sense of place. And as you'll see here, it can be done on the blacktop or anywhere in the schoolyard. Simply being outside, there is so much to observe. This practice really helps students also to switch their idea of outside only as recreation and playtime and begin to build it into a relationship with the world around them and learning time. And I want to make two notes here that while it may look like on the left that we have lots of woods, I can assure you that these are urban schools, and some of them have a very narrow wooded areas. You can see the houses in the background on the schoolyard perimeter. And I share that because outdoor learning can be done in any setting with some brainstorming of how to do it best in your location. And finally, this year with another round of ESSER funds, we are purchasing small gear libraries for all elementary schools, along with gear sheds, sleds to transport gear outside, picnic tables, and outdoor Wi-Fi for middle and high school. And next are nature and place-based walks. And they are great for students and teachers alike. You can go ahead and advance the slide, Allison. They can be tailored to whatever you have at your location. Not only do they benefit students by connecting them to place and place to the curriculum, but it provides a much needed physical movement break for students. The high school students on the left have a campus with very little to no green space. So this is a field ecology class and they use the city as their classroom. And so they've walked the 10 minutes to the Portland Harbor to study the history of it. And on the right, these kindergartners are taking their daily walk and are observing birds in the trees. And this is something I really appreciate, that even the most urban schoolyard has birds that students can connect with and study outside. And later in the presentation, you'll see an image of an off-road wheelchair. We use that for our nature and place-based walks. And that's another possible use of funding, really to help make sure that outdoor practices are inclusive for all abilities. And the last environmental literacy practice I'm going to introduce is the field journals. And the slide can be advanced. This can be designed and scaffolded for pre-K-12 students for different content areas in different formats. So I've used them for art, science, human geography, and place-based studies. What I think makes these practices so valuable is how much a teacher or school can integrate them into what their curricular needs are, so that it's not an extra thing, but a practice that is woven into the existing curriculum. And on the left, you'll see two young boys who are working on a tree study in the snow. And on the right, you'll see there's a group of fifth graders and they're in a multi-week exploration of scientific observational drawing of plants and birds. So I was combining three of the above practices. Students built up to a culminating activity of spending 35 to 40 minutes by themselves at their sit spots after a walking field trip working in their field journals. And I cannot tell you, they felt so empowered about being able to do this, as well as it offered equitable opportunities to explore nature for students who may not feel comfortable doing that out of school. And I can't emphasize, really enough that how much school-based outdoor experiences can have a meaningful impact on equity in the outdoors. So one of my unexpected learnings came last year from a young man who was 9 years old. We were in a narrow slice of woods off the soccer field, and we were gathering some natural materials for an Andy Goldsworthy inspired art piece. When we got to the part of the woods that had tall grass, he called my name. And this alone was notable, as he had not spoken for the first 3 weeks of school. He asked me if there were snakes here and held out his hands really wide. I could tell he was very concerned. And since he was one of my ELL students, I wanted to make sure he knew he was safe. So I shared that there were only small snakes without venom in these woods. His shoulders relaxed immediately. And for the first time, he began to talk to me, telling of a dangerous day that he and his brother had met a large venomous snake in the country he was from. After he shared this, I shared more about the nature of this landscape and the type of animals that live in it. He relaxed even more and pretty soon was one of my chattiest and most smiley students in the class. That day last year left an important impression of how the outdoors can be a place of building trust and community among students and teachers, and how it can be a place of helping a student move from trauma while feeling safe and connected, which can really deepen their overall learning. And here's the photo I mentioned before. I want to briefly share about a student who had mobility issues and trauma around rainy weather. When we started going outside, he was terrified, often saying that he felt like it was going to rain when it was on clearly a sunny day. And in time, he began to trust that I knew about the weather. And I started to share with him what I knew and my process for choosing when and where to be outside. Within weeks, he was the one teaching other students, saying all that he had learned about the weather. It was a phenomenal transformation. And my last story that I want to share is about, I think there's a slide before that, possibly. It was about a pre-K teacher who teaches at a site in the city with minimal outdoor space, having astroturf and a wrought iron fence in very close proximity to the building. And after a PD I did for pre-K teachers, he was inspired to take his students on a 10-minute walk to a city park. And this is what he wrote me the next day. I led my children to Deering Oaks Park and allowed them to roam, explore, and collect natural objects. Not only did they not wander away, their curiosity drove them to interact and engage with the world around them in a meaningful way. They were so small next to those trees, but their happiness seemed to dwarf even the tallest of oaks. We gathered after some time, and the children shared their thoughts about the different items they'd found. We did a scavenger hunt and created a stick sculpture to represent our time at the park. It was a wonderful day, and I oddly enough feel like I can breathe again. And I can't stress enough that we talk about how good outdoor learning is for students, but in my experience, it is also good for teachers and teacher well-being, which, as we all know, is really important in this time. And the last photo I just had to include as a testament that it is possible to teach outside year-round in various settings with all students. These students have been outside every day this year with their nature-based art teacher, and clearly they are comfortable and enjoying themselves. I'm so grateful to be here today and to everyone who is helping to encourage this kind of learning for students all around the US. Thanks for your work and inspiration.
Katie, thank you so much for sharing stories and also emphasizing the importance of outdoor learning, not just for academics, but social and emotional well-being, culturally responsive teaching, benefits to teachers. I mean, it's just, it's incredible to hear from you. And then I'm also, one of the questions I always get is, what about the winter? What about cold weather? And you really showed us that that's not a barrier. So those photos were wonderful. Thank you. I'm excited now to introduce two of our OutTeach team members that are on our instructional coaching team, Teena Hine and Dr. Jarri Goodman. Teena has worked in education for over 20 years, and she has held the role of teacher, interventionist, instructional coach, and West Virginia State Technology Coordinator. And what I love about her is how she brings technology into the outdoors. Dr. Jarri Goodman was a lead science teacher in Georgia before he came to work with us at OutTeach, and most recently completed his doctorate in curriculum and instruction. He's focused his career and his research on three-dimensional science instruction and culturally proficient teaching. So I really want to turn it over to you all and look forward to what you have to share, Teena and Jarri.
Thank you, Jeanne. It's very obvious that we are all here because we're invested in the student benefits of outdoor learning experiences. And it's no secret that students benefit from these experiences in a variety of ways. But to touch on a few of the most important and impactful ways, we can begin by emphasizing the inquiry-based, student-centered, real-world learning experiences. The outdoor space offers endless opportunities to explore while naturally setting the stage for place-based learning. Not only are students engaged in problem solving, teachers are also relieved from creating an experience from scratch. Additionally, outdoor learning equalizes the learning experience for all students, creating a meaningful, authentic, and culturally relevant opportunity as students are able to personalize their learning experiences. Building a STEM mindset is also embedded in making observations and conducting experiments, while students work in teams to communicate their ideas, which in turn fosters social and emotional learning as well. Now, research indicates, we can go to the next slide, Allison. Research indicates that time spent specifically on reading and math take precedence in the classroom, while science only receives about 11% of instructional time. This is why it is critically important to create opportunities for our students, not just to read about, but do science while integrating other content areas as well. Next slide, Allison. As we take a look at the evidence on project-based learning, we can see an astounding difference in student achievement. Using a multiple literacies project-based learning experience takes on a systems approach where we integrate science, teaching, and learning materials with the other content areas. This method of instruction is designed to increase student science knowledge, engage the learners in literacy and mathematical skills, and support students' social and emotional learning through self-reflection, collaboration, and just having ownership of one's work. The research on outdoor learning using this project-based model outperforms traditional instruction for all students. And now I'll turn it over to Dr. Goodman to talk a little bit more about what that looks like in action.
Yes, good evening, everyone. My name is Jarri Goodman. I'm an instructional coach at OutTeach, where we focus on outdoor phenomena that students are motivated to explain. This focused the learning to shift from just learning about a topic to figuring out how or why something happens. Taking science instruction outdoor isn't really a difficult task. An example would be taking students for a nature walk around their campus to identify deposition, weathering, erosion, and the impact on organisms. Now, instead of teachers just front-loading information about the core idea, students are delighted to take on the challenge of exploration and discovery. The reason being is that the outside experience are real world, authentic, and student-led. It really shifts the focus from the teacher to the student so that they can build on skills such as reasoning from evidence. This means our scholars are actually doing science, not just memorizing facts. They're having the opportunity to build science and engineering skills such as developing a model or constructing an argument as they explain the core idea. This experience allows teachers to integrate English language arts and math standards in such a meaningful way. When I think about math instruction, I learned early in school that you just don't learn math by memorizing facts. You learn math by actually solving math problems. And I believe it is the same thing with science. Scholars need to be out there doing science and applying content knowledge as they discuss various discrepant events with their peers and teachers. As an instructional coach, I really enjoyed the role of working with teachers as they move their science instruction outdoors. The advice I give to teachers when creating these inquiry-based lessons outside is that your phenomena don't have to be phenomenal to facilitate learning. You don't need the Grand Canyon to demonstrate erosion. Everyday things are really around our students and have the opportunity to really engage them in different ways to think about it. What's even better is that everyday things are automatically accessible to our scholars as well. Every student can observe a phenomenon such as how shadow changes over a day or investigating the flow of energy from a water well. So as an instructional coach, it brings such joy to just see how outdoor experiential instruction heightens students' curiosity because they're making connection to the real world around them and being allowed to really engage all their senses as they strive to explain the phenomena or try to solve a real world problem. Back to you, Teena.
Thank you, Dr. Goodman. So as we aim to cultivate students who, again, not just read about, but do science, we envision our students in the future careers of tomorrow. We already know that 13 of the 20 fastest growing industries are STEM related. Now, this leads us to conclude that if we specifically invest in building STEM skills early, that's a straight path to the STEM jobs. However, when we look at the necessary skills, 8 in 10 employers say social and emotional skills are the most important to success, and yet the hardest skills to find. Now, according to the Society of Human Resource Management, the top missing workforce skills employers have indicated are problem solving, critical thinking, creativity, adaptability, flexibility, just the ability to change gears and handle risks, and communication, while technical skills include various trade skills, data analysis, and science and engineering practices. This leads us to think that if educators invest in SEL or focus on 21st century learning skills, that we will be preparing our students for the careers of tomorrow. Now, while creating a focus in each of these areas is needed, they cannot be thought of as separate entities. A problem arises when we treat subject matter and soft skills as something we develop in our students in silos. Rarely do we see a job posting that states there will be limited communication and math is the sole focus. Outdoor science instruction supports the prime intersection of content matter, the 4 C's, and the social aspect of communicating ideas. Next slide. What's more, beyond being linked, the embedded connection that outdoor science instruction incorporates builds and supports each critical area. The investment in outdoor science instruction not only increases student performance, it cultivates experiences and knowledge, creating a ladder to success.
Thank you, Teena and Jarri. One of the best parts of my job is working alongside such an amazing instructional coaching team and seeing you all in action with teachers. Katie, Jarri, and Teena talked a lot about the power of outdoor experiential learning and instruction, and how much more fun and engaging it is, not only for students, but also for teachers. They also connected it to future career paths and possibilities, and that's so important. So next, we're going to hear about ensuring that all students can also meet district-wide goals as we embed outdoor learning as part of an entire education system. Janetta Greenwood, who is the K-12 science coordinator of Clayton County Public Schools in Georgia. She's also the president of the Georgia Science Teachers Association. She's joining us next to share how she is pairing early science and STEM education with outdoor learning to improve outcomes for students across an entire school district. So welcome, Janetta.
Thank you so much, Jeanne. Good afternoon, everyone. I am excited to speak a little bit about what is happening in Clayton County in Georgia. And so one thing I do want to highlight is we're probably thinking, well, why the outdoors? Why science? Why do those two work so well together? And what I will say is, at the foundational core of what science is authentically about, it's about using the natural environment to understand the whys and the hows in a way to make improvements to society, right? So we want to give students these authentic experiences that allows them to create a passion around science, because we recognize that STEM jobs is where we are headed. And we want to make sure as early as kindergarten that we're exposing students to these skills and these practices in a very authentic way, so that science and math and technology and engineering doesn't have anxiety or a nervous feel as they are being exposed to these experiences. So outdoor experiential learning provides that gateway. And it's something that students are comfortable with, they're knowledgeable about, they have experienced the outdoor. It's something that they do on a daily basis. So why not, as educators, leverage that experience and leverage it in a way that not only provides students with access to opportunities to learn the content, but really creates an equity. Because we talk about so much about background knowledge and the importance of that background knowledge, providing students the knowledge that's needed to access the content, and the outdoor experience kind of creates that level experience for everyone. And so what I love about outdoor learning is that there are no silos. And what I mean by that, I think I heard Katie and several others mention this, integration is so important. And when we're thinking about how we're teaching and how we're learning, we oftentimes separate things. And we recognize, though, in the real world, that's not really how it really happens. And so the outdoor environment allows students to see that blended experience. And when you think about math and ELA, I always tell teachers, because I recognize that science may not get as much time at certain grade levels, as well as social studies. And we have to think about when we're using science and social studies as a gateway for students to actually apply the math and the ELA. I always say it's the language of the application, right? Math and ELA is the language that science and social studies uses to communicate their ideas, their understandings, and really to solve problems. So it's really allowing students to see the value in everything they're learning, but in a more integrated way. So when you're thinking about the various opportunities that you can provide students in your district, I don't want you to think that you have to immediately go build a garden, or that you immediately have to find a large funding source to support this idea. Because from the district level, I'm telling you, there's multiple different ways and multiple different opportunities that you can provide students. So on the screen right now, what you are seeing is some very simplistic simplistic ways that didn't really cost much financial support at all, that provided students with opportunities to explore using the outdoor learning environment to access content. I'll speak specifically about the picture in the middle. At the beginning of the year, we wanted to give our kindergarten students a great exposure to a science experiment that also lends itself to ELA and math. And so we gave students seeds, and we told them, hey, just toss them out into your community, into your schoolyard, onto the sidewalk, and observe what happens. And just through that experience, students have the opportunity to access content knowledge, because now they're starting to learn immediately, what does it take for living things to survive? What do living things need in order to live? And so no cost really associated to it, just really being open to the idea of providing students with that opportunity to get outside, to observe, to use measurements, to look for patterns. All that could happen just through that one simple task. And that's the power of the outdoors, because it doesn't require much, but it does require the students to become the leaders in that experience. Next slide. So also, when you think about, and I wanted to make sure I highlighted one of our biggest programs that we are doing currently, because right now I'm sure you're thinking in your mind, that sounds great, but I have tests that I have to prepare for, state assessment, pacing is so important. I got to make sure I get all these standards in. And once again, that's the wonderful thing and the powerful thing about outdoor experiential learning, because one, we know students perform better when they have an experience to attach to some knowledge. And so when you're thinking about creating these opportunities and experiential learning for students outdoors, I wanted to highlight our test prep program that we have pushed out called Test Prep with a Green Thumb, because we often want students to go back to, when it's time for test prep, drill and skill, memorization. But we know we know that educational research says that that doesn't necessarily always yield great outcomes. So let's really think about maybe pairing an experience to the review process so that students have something they could draw upon when they actually read the questions. So our Test Prep with a Green Thumb initiative, we actually started it during the pandemic, because once again, we were at home, students were at home, didn't have much access to the traditional test prep opportunities. And so we wanted students to see an integrated way to address any gaps that may have existed, but using the outdoor experience to really start reviewing for those fundamental concepts. And finding a way to do the integration saves times, save financial resources, and really allows students to start connecting the ideas. Because when they are able to connect the math to the ELA, to the science, to the social studies, because yes, outdoor environmental experiential learning does include the social studies, it allows the students to really have a deeper understanding of the content. And so Test Prep with a Green Thumb moves students in a way that it becomes a tangible, hands-on experience and more likely to lead to better outcomes for students. So I will wrap everything up by just really saying, think about really what can you do? Start small. Reach out to your science coordinator, because there is professional development available. Outteach does a wonderful job with it, but there's also a lot of other different resources that you can utilize to help guide you in this process. But do not let it intimidate you, because I promise you the outdoor experiential learning process is probably the least intimidating environment for both the teacher and for the students, because it's something that they are knowledgeable about. It's something they've been exposed to, and it's something that they encounter on a day-to-day basis. So they're more likely to be reflective of that particular knowledge that they could bring to the table to give them access to the content. And I keep stressing that, access to the content, right? Because we want students to feel comfortable with whatever new content that they're learning, but be able to draw upon an experience that they've had to make those connections to those ideas so that they are actually a lasting thought and idea and understanding. And so that is all I have to share. And just know that it is doable, and just keep it small and grow it step by step. But at the end of the day, you have the outdoors, and that's all you need to really create memorable, lifelong learning for your students.
Thank you so much, Janetta. I'm really excited about the outdoor test prep initiative and really happy to hear that you're seeing such good results. Now that we've heard from our panelists, we really want to hear from you. And so if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A, and we've saved time for our panelists to answer questions for you. Just think about anything that you might want to know more about, or anything that could help you get started with outdoor learning. And I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Allison, who will lead the Q&A period.
Well, thank you so much, Jeanne. And yeah, I've been watching the chat and the Q&A section of the webinar, and I've already got a couple ready for the team here. Katie, get ready to turn your mic on, because one person wanted to know specifically what you were doing to introduce your students to some of Maine's indigenous communities and the culturally responsive teaching practices that you were using in an outdoor environment there. So Katie, are you with us?
I'm here. And thank you for that question. It's a really exciting one. So LD 291 passed over 20 years ago in Maine that mandated integrating Indigenous history and curriculum and worldview into the standards curriculum. And it hasn't happened yet, but it has been happening. And Portland's going to be one of the first districts in Maine to roll it out. And what we are doing is creating a Wabanaki Studies, STEM, and outdoor learning curriculum that will be rolled out pre-K-12 over the next few years. And it's really amazing, because that's when I was talking about place-based learning. It's really deepening that sense of place to include not just what's there now, but what was there and who the stewards of the land have been for thousands upon thousands of years, and also encouraging students to build the relationships that help that be possible. And so Portland works with a tribal advisory council that oversees that curriculum, and we have a coordinator that's dedicated just to that, who I work very closely with to see how we can make bring outdoor learning to have authenticity as the students are increasing their worldview.
Oh, thank you so much, Katie. I appreciate it. The next question I've got is probably for Jarri. So Jarri, get ready to, or Dr. Goodman, my apologies. Get ready to turn your microphone on. Somebody's asking for recommendations on how to introduce students to outdoor learning, how to set expectations for them to go out the first time, the second time, how to manage your class outdoors. That seems to be a common point of trepidation for people unfamiliar with outdoor teaching and learning.
Yes. So taking your students outdoors, first, I always like to tell the teachers to think about their standards and the content within their standards, and just seeing where the outdoor fits in. If you're looking at a standard about plants, there's multiple plants that students may explore outdoors. When it comes to the classroom management, always setting boundaries, knowing which areas are the areas where students can go and explore. If you're having any materials or tools that you're taking with you, having those things organized. I always say making sure students have like a book, a piece of paper, and a pencil to write on, and they're all set and ready to go. And I always like to have a little whistle or bell with me, so when their students are out exploring within the boundary, they can hear, the bell or the whistle for everyone to kind of line back up or to come back to attention.
Thank you so much, Jarri. I think that's basic sort of housekeeping things. I think really give teachers a lot of confidence, and make sure that students know that this isn't playtime and this is not recess, even though it's fun and engaging. I have a question specifically for Janetta. Janetta, get ready to turn your mic back on. Someone would like an example of a test prep that you can achieve with a green thumb learning experience.
Sure, absolutely. So once again, when you're doing test prep, you want to do it in an integrated way so that students are starting to see all the different connecting ideas that maybe are covered in that particular grade level. So I'll use the one for 5th grade. They're specifically looking at, do magnets how magnets can impact the growth of a plant. And so in that particular hands-on experience, students are addressing one of our standards, which actually really deals with understanding how magnets function and that particular concept around magnetism. But also now they're also addressing what does it take for plants to survive and live. And so they're dealing with the different minerals that could be present inside of the soil. And then of course, we talk about the measurement piece, because of course, when they're doing the magnet, of course, the magnetic field would need to be a certain distance in relationship to the plant. And they can actually test that as a variable as well. And so they're dealing with some math concepts. They're dealing with some definitely some science concepts, but then at the same token, they can start addressing some of that communication, evidence-based piece when it comes to ELA, because now they have to actually provide, based on evidence from their experiment, truly how magnetism can impact the survival of a plant. And so you really, in that one task, have addressed 3 different contents that addresses 3 different standards that prepares them for that particular assessment at 5th grade.
Thank you so much for that answer. I loved that, the idea of green test prep. That's just wonderful. We just got a question in, probably best suited for Katie. How can you introduce outdoor learning for pre-K? And what are resources to show parents the importance of being outdoors?
Great. Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you now.
This feels like the question of the hour. So much about pre-K right now, and it is something that we're really invested in Portland. So the question, Allison, was how to begin.
Yes.
Resources.
Well, and how do you win over parents?
You know, that's a great question. I think, you know, there's a pretty robust group in Maine, since most of Maine is different than Portland, that's really into the forest school movement, but that's not possible in our location, nor desirable for everyone in our community. So what I just talk is really about the baby steps, you know, and just so let the play, you know, let there be more unstructured play outside, let there be more loose parts play, let the students start to build in ways that might, so that their play might be a little less playground based and more gathering based. And so you can start there. And then one way I really think is so simple, and it's one of the environmental literacy practices, is a nature connection table where students actually practice gathering, bringing it inside, and then they also can make that into a science investigation table, or like a let's talk about it table. And so that's a very small way. And so what I suggest when you're working with people that may not have a lot of familiarity or are not sure about outdoor learning is just take very small steps. I think Janetta was alluding to that too. You just start where you are. And I would encourage the teacher to start wherever they're comfortable, because I think if a teacher's comfortable, then the students are comfortable, then the parents are comfortable. And for us in Portland, we're really looking at, because we're committed to a pre-K aftercare next year, we're starting to see how could that be predominantly outdoors, and then bring that more and more into the curriculum.
Thank you so much, Katie. I appreciate it. Next question, I think, is probably for Grace. Grace, how do you take a moment to turn your mic on. How do you overcome any naysayers, either at the school level or the community level? How do you demonstrate the efficacy and the importance of outdoor learning to folks who may find the practice a little outside their comfort zone?
That's a really great question, and I don't think that there's one answer that's going to solve that mystery for everyone. I think it really depends and is very place specific. And so I would start there. I'd start talking to the teachers, talking to the community to figure out what is it that you are apprehensive about, what is it that you like about outdoor learning or curious about, want to find out more about, so then you can start addressing what those concerns are. Maybe it's related to health and safety, or maybe it's related to not feeling prepared or confident. But by figuring out what some of the concerns are, then you can rally your school community and figure out how to then convince the school district who has the control of the funding that this is something that your community needs and your school needs to be successful. We always want to do what's best for the students, and we want to make sure that the teachers feel supported to then be working with our students. And so having a good idea of what your community wants and needs, and then moving that up to the decision makers is key.
Thank you so much, Grace. I appreciate that insight. We got one question that I think I'll go ahead and answer. Someone asked what kind of emphasis in terms of curriculum programming and budgets is there on environmental justice for some of these outdoor education programs. And that's actually the topic of an upcoming webinar, I believe the 4th webinar hosted by EcoRise. And if you go to the Big Green Outdoor Webinars page that I'm sure some helpful person will toss into the chat, you can see the date for that. And if you registered for this, you are automatically registered for that, and we'll get a reminder when that webinar is upcoming, but I think that's in about 4 weeks. And I don't see any more questions. If somebody wants to put in one more question, you've got a little bit of time. We're at 53 minutes. So thank you so much to all of our speakers for making sure we had plenty of time to address everyone's individual answers. And I see one more question, but the question is, why are schools not required to have gardens and funding to support outdoor learning and garden coordinators? And since those decisions are often made hyper locally, I'm not going to be able to speak to that.
Allison, can I attempt to answer that question?
Yeah, please.
Okay. Okay. So it really depends on funding and where funding availability comes from. I will say in Georgia, we are lucky enough right now to have a Senate bill that's going out regarding this, because they are really pushing the outdoor experiential learning process. And so as the president of the Georgia Science Supervisor Association, I have had to write a couple of letters and really do some lobbying around that. But it really starts at that level, reaching out to your representatives, your senators, so that they make it a priority to create a space for that. And then it has a trickle down effect. And then of course, I will say oftentimes, if you have a superintendent who believes in the vision, and I'm lucky enough to have that, they also will allocate the funds to support those different types of initiatives. So I do think the best approach is just finding that cheerleader, that person who believes in what you believe, whether it's at the Senate level, at the state, whether it's your superintendent, whether it's your science coordinator or your principal, finding somebody that champions that idea and then getting them to fall in behind you to support it. And that's the best way to approach it, because the funds are there. It's just, how are those funds allocated?
And I think we're at time, but I just want to thank our panelists for being here today. Everything that they shared was so insightful, and your questions also have added to that. So thank you to our participants as well. We've heard stories, we've seen data, we've been inspired about the positive impact that outdoor learning has across all academic subjects, but also on other great benefits for kids, from social emotional benefits and many, many others. So I wish you all well on your journey to bring more outdoor learning into your schools, into your districts, into your communities. We will follow up and share all the resources that were in the chat, so you will have access to those as well. And we hope that you join us all outside. Have a wonderful evening.